We have some breaking legal news this Monday morning. It's looking like the House Committee on Oversight will be bringing or may be bringing inherent contempt charges against Pam Bondi. Now, that sounds maybe scary, but also confusing because what the heck am I even talking about? Let's back up. Friday was the deadline for Pam Bondi, the Department of Justice, to release all of the Epstein files they possessed, all of them. And this was pursuant to the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And not surprisingly, she did not. She did not follow that law. This is a law that was passed really over Donald Trump's will, but he pretended that he wanted. Remember, this was the law that for which the vote on this in the House was so threatening to Donald Trump that the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, shut down the House for many weeks. And then only the minute the House opened up for business, there were enough votes to do the so-called discharge petition, which means get the vote on the floor without the Speaker who controls everything. And once that happened, it became clear that there were enough votes from Republicans in the House to vote up on this bill. No matter the arm twisting, no matter the threats, they were there. And then Donald Trump saw the writing on the wall and acted as if this is what he wanted and told the Republicans, get in line, in a new line with the Democrats and support the law. It immediately went over to the Senate, you might recall, and passed that very day when it went over through unanimous consent, just a voice vote. That was the shocker. Donald Trump and I think Mike Johnson believed that John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, was going to slow it down. Okay, this may sound like inside baseball, but the bottom line is there is a law on the books that was signed by the president with overwhelming support, only one dissenter in the House. Overwhelming support. We never see this for legislation to release these files. And the only exemptions in there related to essentially making sure the victims' identities were not disclosed, as well as the ability to withhold files or parts of files or images that were the release of which could jeopardize an ongoing investigation. Right? These are small exemptions from the law. And what came out on Friday was almost laughable because, let me just be clear. The law also makes clear that withholding the identities or redacting the faces or names of powerful individuals or elected officials simply because this could be embarrassing to them was not permitted. Well, guess what? That's what they did. And perhaps one of the most important things withheld was the original indictment that is under seal that was not filed in federal court in Florida back when Jeff Epstein got a slap on the wrist. And ended up, this was in 2005, it ended up serving a very short period of time. And it would be very, very helpful, to say the least, to have had that document. But of course, it was not released. So what is Congress going to do about that? Let's listen to Ro Khanna, Democrat from California, and Tom Massey, the Republican. And I want to say that he's from, I don't want to get his state wrong. He's from West Virginia. And Massey and Khanna made the rounds this weekend including speaking with Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation to talk about their plans and their frustrations with Pam Bondi violating this law. Let's take a listen.
48 hours, we have seen the Justice Department acknowledge it's an incomplete release, but they have put out more than 13,000 files. They say more will come. This isn't everything you asked for just yet, but would you acknowledge that they are complying with the spirit, if not the intent of your law?
No, they're flouting the spirit and the letter of the law. It's very troubling, the posture that they've taken. And I won't be satisfied until the survivors are satisfied. You know, I said in the hours leading up to this release that we will know if they are complying if they implicate any of the other criminals that are involved and the suspects that are involved, that the witnesses, the victims themselves have given to the FBI, and they've never been mentioned.
Well,
okay, so these folks are talking about inherent contempt. And unfortunately, some members of the Democratic Party are trying to undermine this committee and the efforts for transparency to help victims and hold these very powerful people accountable. And so let me share that with you. This is Tim Kaine. You know that Tim Kaine, you might remember, is not just a U.S. Senator. He from Virginia. He was also Hillary Clinton's nominee for vice president in the 2016 campaign. And I think I've said this. If I said this once, I've said it 1,000 times to anyone who will hear me. I remember where I was the exact moment I heard Tim Kaine was the nominee. I was in some Chinese restaurant downstairs from the oh gosh, what it was. Now I see Jesse's come up on stage and now I'm nervous. But it was from Ralph Nader's organization, and now I'm totally spacing on. I want to say Perg, but I'm just spacing out here. But I was having lunch with someone from this guy named Bart Naylor, who works there, and we were having lunch downstairs, and I remember looking on Public Citizen, God, and I was looking on my phone, and I said, she's going to lose the election. I mean, this is the dumbest possible person she could have nominated for a number of reasons. She needed to have a candidate who was to her left. She needed to have someone other than this mealy-mouthed centrist apologist, right? And so I'm giving you that context before I show you this Tim Kaine clip, because, of course, he's very close to the Clintons. And we all know that Bill Clinton was a longtime friend and pal with Jeffrey Epstein. And even though Susie Wiles said she saw nothing in the files indicating that he went to the island, that is really Susie Wiles, not sure if I trust her, but secondly, that's really not the point. Anyone who was palling around with Jeff Epstein, that's problematic. First. Secondly, Bill Clinton, we have a lot to say about him in the run-up to the 2008 financial crisis. His policies there with Larry Summers and to further deregulate and desupervise the financial system inflated the bubble and helped our economy crash. I have a lot to say about Bill Clinton, not feeling bad that he appears in the files. But I give you this context because I'm wondering what motivates Tim Kaine when he says the following. Let's play this.
All these files need to come out.
Well, Congressman Rowe Comment and Thomas Massie, as I was just saying, who led the push to release the files, say they're looking at options including impeachment and contempt for DOJ officials. Would you support those steps going that far, impeachment or contempt?
I think that's premature. Here's a recent example. The Pentagon was dragging their feet on not releasing files about the Venezuelan boat strikes. And so we put into the defense bill a requirement that they're either going to release or the travel budget for the Secretary of Defense is going to be reduced. We have tools.
Oh my God. What the F? That is his example? Withholding a portion of the budget? How's that working, Tim? We still don't have the so-called second tap part of that video. What an absolute, oh God, I feel really angry right now, but when these people are trying to be on our side, when I really always vote for Democrats, but I want to tear my hair out because they do this kind of shit. But let me add, what let me just say, what's really contemptible is Tim Kaine has nothing to say about this. Let me be really clear. Inherent contempt proceedings can be brought just by the House. So, Tim Kaine, stay in your lane. Okay? It has nothing to do with you at all. Secondly, inherent contempt proceedings can be brought by a single committee. And I only have 3 minutes to school you on inherent contempt, but I promise there'll be more time to talk about this should this move forward. Remember, just having Ro Khanna and Tom Massey doesn't guarantee that this committee will approve this, but let's give you a quick schooling on this. Okay, who are we even talking about? We're talking about Pam Bondi herself as a human being. What is my source? My source is the Congressional Research Service and a memo they wrote, a research paper they wrote and updated in 2017 about Congress's contempt power. Okay. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. The key thing here is this is sort of the preamble. There are 3 types of ways Congress can deal with getting people to comply. One of them is actually using their own inherent contempt power. They, of course, can use criminal statutes and refer things to the Department of Justice. Good luck with that, and so on. So this would be a situation where they would have to use their inherent contempt power. What the heck is this? Well, guess what? The Supreme Court in 1821, for the first time, faced this question of Congress's inherent contempt power. And it involved, this is kind of a crazy story, long story made short. It involves some guy who was apparently trying to bribe a member of Congress. And so as a result, Congress wanted to do something about it. They looked at a 1795 precedent in the history of the British Parliament and also our state legislatures and decided they were going to question this guy. And so how did they get this guy who was supposedly bribing folks into Congress? Well, they used the sergeant at arms. Again, I've now got 1 minute, but the point here is the Supreme Court decided, well, let me back up. I'm just going to get out of you don't need to see that. I can deal with that on my own. But the point here is this guy got dragged in by the sergeant of arms. And so how does this get to the Supreme Court? He sues. He sues because for battery and false imprisonment. And then we get to the Supreme Court decides, yes, Congress has that inherent contempt power. Then there's this whole section of the memo describing the process for inherent contempt. I think the key thing you should know is that imprisonment can happen. In this case, I think Khanna wants just fines for every day against her. I guess the point is there is now a process in place because of a later Supreme Court case that has to, I'm going to remove this all, that a process of giving someone a hearing. Now, if Pam Bondi is charged with inherent contempt, she can go to the Supreme Court and challenge that. All I'm trying to say here before I bring Jesse up on stage is inherent contempt is a real thing. I think this would be a good time to use it. Tim Kaine, this is not your circus, not your monkey. Stay the fuck out of this. And finally, guys, this cover-up is about more than victimization of young women. There is also a money story here. And I'm really glad that Ron Wyden has been trying to put those pieces together despite the efforts of Trump's Justice Department to tamp that down. Okay, now, without further ado, or a little further ado, I want to bring Jesse Eisinger up on stage. But first, I have to tell you, I have been insulting him every time I have him on here because I've been saying he's a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter and editor now at ProPublica. However, he is a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winning reporter because that's how, I shouldn't be this way. I sound like Donald Trump, like prizes. But the thing is, Jesse did not give himself this prize. This was fairly earned through his dogged investigation skills and his teamwork. Let me tell you you can't read this, but Jesse is now, I think, just promoted in November to, he can tell me, maybe assistant managing editor, but he's coming here today to share with us how he's looking back on the year of this Trump administration and to highlight the biggest stories coming out of ProPublica. And also, he won't say this, but I want you to give money to ProPublica. It's an independent news organization. And I will, maybe one of the mods, I think this can happen, is Deb here. Deb, if you're feeling well or not, AJ or Jason, can you throw up a link for me in the chat to ProPublica so people can consider donating? We're not getting good news from CBS with Barry Weiss spiking stories about CCOT prison. I think we need to trust the people who cannot be bought. And with lots of ado, but after all the further ado, here's Jesse.
Hey.
Hey.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Very nice introduction. I'm hoping for the prestigious FIFA Journalism Prize this year. You know, that would really.
Yeah, I was going to mention the FIFA award. Are you feeling bad that you didn't get that FIFA Peace Prize?
I am a little annoyed. I'm going to write them and tell them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want? I mean, FIFA, the organization that was until last week, facing federal charges for lots of corruption. I think, didn't those just dissolve? Weird.
Yeah, I can't understand how it happened. Yeah. Well,
no
this is an administration that doesn't believe in white collar crime in many different, in all respects. So,
Jesse, this is so painful. I remember the first time we met in person. I think it was a sushi restaurant, and I was still working. I had just almost published my book on the financial crisis, as with jumping into white collar crime, and you were too. And that would have been, end of 2013, early 2014. God, 11 years ago. And now, I mean, what is there to say about white collar crime? I literally teach this subject this spring, and I think I just have to talk about the dual state. Like, yes, your clients still have to follow the law unless they have enough money to thank the president. I mean, I actually say stuff like that in class because that's true. I mean, do you have any advice for me? I mean,
no, I think that the dual state kind of framework is exactly right. I think it was some Ecuadorian
Ernst
general, I can't remember, or the general who says, "For my enemies, the law; for my friends, everything."
Yes, I love that quote. Yeah, it's true.
And I think that's the proper framework, that you can indeed run afoul of the law, especially if you are an undocumented Venezuelan in the United States. But if you're powerful and wealthy and you've been accused of committing some kind of white collar crime, they fundamentally do not believe it. And it's a confluence of an ideological movement that you understand and have tracked very well over your career over the last several decades, with a kind of narrowing of the statutes and an elimination of the tools and resources that we bring to bear on white collar crime, but also with this combination of utter brazen corruption and access. And that's the thing that's really new. It didn't operate in the Obama administration or the Biden administration or even the George W. Bush administration, that you could buy your way into access and then have your case brazenly dismissed. This is really something new and shocking, and we should mark it and not pretend that it's a continuation of what were bad trends before.
And I think this is such a hard thing because, there were bad trends before, and there were sort of ebbs and flows. But I think despite that, people got away with stuff. People are disgusted by it. When people read my book, Big Dirty Money, or read the Chicken Shit Club that came out a few years earlier, including, by the way, it was on Jeff Epstein's shelf. I know you saw that, didn't you?
I know. That was very bizarre. I don't know
my
how
book
to take
wasn't
that.
there.
Yeah,
he was dead before my book was
very
published.
dubious recommendation there, I guess. guess. Yeah.
Jesus. But yeah. But when we wrote these things, people were like angry because people still could be angry. Now it's sort of people are cynical. Like when I can't even assign big dirty money to my students anymore because it's kind of like, you think you're onto something, lady? And I'm like, yeah, well, I wrote this a while ago, but it's hard because it isn't a continuation. And yet at the same thing, I think there's something you said that ended up, I sort of added to when I talk about this. I think I'm adapting this, but if Donald Trump had spent time in federal prison, he wouldn't have been in the Oval Office. And he actually himself is the result of a system that looked the other way and slapped people on the wrist. He wouldn't, it could have just taken the Department of Justice instead of just the SEC to come after him. But I guess it's not just him. Anyway, since we only have a little bit of time, we're running to 9:30. How do you see your role as a journalist, as an editor? Do you ever get pressure directly from the Trump administration to spike stories that you can talk about? And how do we move forward to get through this terrible timeline?
Yeah, well, we at ProPublica, before the election started planning to cover the Trump administration in case he won. And what we realized was that this was going to be something that was an enormously consequential event that was going to require a huge kind of reallocation of resources from ProPublica. ProPublica, we have about 140, 150 editorial staff now. We're an organization of about 60, 65 million. So we've grown enormously, but we're still relatively small, but it's very dispersed across subject matter and across the country, but we thought we would marshal a lot of resources. So we planned to look at the federal government itself and the transformations. And then when he won, we were prepared to do this. So that's the change, is that we put more effort to the Trump administration than we had to the previous administration or the Biden administration or the Obama administration, because we thought that it was so newsworthy that it warranted the kind of changes and the attacks. It's a multifaceted story, which there's corruption, there are attacks on the rule of law, and then there are the policy consequences of, say, the immigration policy, which is an unprecedented move toward, obviously deportations, as everybody knows now. And there's a confluence of corruption and rule of law challenges and the policies changes, of course. But we think of them as kind of these sort of three distinct areas.
Mm-hmm.
So we've tried to aggressively cover it. We've covered transformation at USAID, at EPA, at the Veterans Administration. So a lot of agencies that get relatively little coverage normally. We've tried to look at the places that are undercovered. And our principles of journalism haven't changed. So we reach out to the Trump administration every single time and explain to them what we've ascertained in our reporting with an open mind. And we want to understand if something that we have reported is not true, or if there's some other context. And occasionally they do provide it. These guys, they're intellectually dishonest, and sometimes they act in bad faith, and sometimes they're telling you the truth, and sort of parsing out when bad actors and serial liars are actually telling the truth is very challenging. So you really need to be disciplined and paying attention to them and listening to what they say and trying to give them the due response that they deserve. Even though sometimes they're bad faith actors, they still ahead of time deserve all the response. But we've never spiked a story. No, and they wouldn't have the power remotely to spike a story, and no one would go for it at ProPublica. It would be unimaginable.
Right. Do you ever, I'm still reeling. Like, I didn't have much hope for the Bari Weiss editorial leadership, but to have promoted a story and then to read the journalist, one of the two journalists who is on it, who's worked for 60 Minutes for decades, talk about what went down, that this was apparently the administration refused to comment, and therefore they didn't comment. And so therefore they're not commenting, meant that until she, this is her claim, until she got a response from them, she wouldn't run the story. Well, that would be a veto as opposed to not commenting. I see stories where people say we reached out and, if you give them plenty of time and they refuse to comment, that's part of the story, I would think, as opposed to a reason not to run it.
Yeah, no, this is astonishingly corrupt and horrific from Weiss. And I'm actually surprised, too, because I thought she wasn't going to be quite this baldly corrupt and also this stupid. I mean, you can be a deft top editor and say something needs more reporting, and that if you say we don't have it and it needs more reporting, you can put a story in purgatory for a very long time, but you can't do it after it's been lawyered, after it's been in the can and it's about to run in 3 hours. Then you're just killing it for political reasons, which is really disgusting and appalling. But yes, to your point, we give people deadlines to respond. And then if they haven't responded by the deadline has to be fair. If it's an extremely complex story, we'll give them more time. We don't just drop it 3 hours before.
How much? Can you give me? Obviously, if there's breaking news and it's like something blew up in the middle of DC, you might have to run it quickly. But a story like this, it's probably weeks, right?
Yeah, well, we'll probably give about a week and a half or so for a story like this. If it's a one fact story that, and they could scoop us by trying to put it out with some kind of spin, we'll give them a really tight deadline, like maybe hours. If it's something that's easily ascertainable and they can have a quick response to. But if it's something that's complex where they have to go back and look at records and they have to talk to multiple people, we try to give them adequate time, and we have long conversations about what that means. Is it a week? Is it 72 hours? We put a lot of care, not just in the questions that we ask, but the time that we give people to respond. And we think, it's just sort of a fairness feeling, a sense, but we're governed by the notion that it should be fair.
There's also this idea, with print journalism, if they don't get back to you and they want to, you can quickly update the online story, even before, for those people that still publish on paper, before the paper comes out. With something like 60 Minutes, when you do video on broadcast, that's why they had this vetted, as you referred to, by the lawyers. This is by many editors, many layers, because it's harder to make a correction on a video story. Yeah, you could put a bar over something, but it's out there. So that's also indicates to me they gave more time. There was more.
Yeah, I'm sure that they gave adequate time. I mean, some journalistic outfits are flawed. We are not without our flaws, and so it's very possible that in this context they didn't give the administration adequate understanding or notice of what the story was. But my default is that this was not the way it happened, because I think that Weiss was asking questions on Friday or Thursday, according to the reports, which, if that were the case, that they hadn't adequately responded, you wouldn't have the thing be running on Sunday and pull it at the last minute. You would address that then. So I'm skeptical that was really the flaw here. But yes, we can never give people a veto over what we're going to publish. We give them adequate time. We give them a deadline. We communicate what the deadline is clearly to them. If they ask for more time, we say, are you going to give a substantive answer if we give you more time as a courtesy? And then we make a judgment. If they say we're going to give you a substantive answer, that doesn't necessarily mean we believe you, but we default to trying to be to make every effort to get the other side, and we change our mind. We change our mind when presented with evidence to the contrary to what we
As
we
one
have
should.
reported.
I do that myself as a
Right.
human.
I mean, the
Amazing.
key is to stay intellectually honest. And when I say we don't spike stories, we change stories, and sometimes we don't run stories in response after receiving responses. But we do not spike stories based on pressure. We don't spike stories based on some amorphous veto that they have. That would be totally journalistic dereliction.
Now, as we wrap things up, Jesse, I can't ask you to predict the future, although that would be quite handy. But, you talked earlier about how this was what Trump is doing in terms of corruption is a big departure. So is his behavior in having the US government take pieces of equity in big companies. So is his outright killing of people, fishermen. And there are all these things he's doing that are tremendous departures. Are we fizzling out? Is it going to continue just at this level? Or is it possible we're actually going to get into not just his authoritarian behavior, but even more so? Are we going to become Hungary or Russia? Or are there signs that you see that maybe things could reverse, either because somebody passes, that he finally dies, or JD Vance isn't as popular? I mean, can you tell me, I guess, if you have a prediction and what hopes you hold out for democracy, what is left of it in the coming year?
Well, I'm enormously pessimistic about
By
it.
nature,
Yeah.
or just
Well, I wake up every morning and I'm angry, but I go to work and we cover the news. So in some ways that requires some optimism that it matters. But I think that we have seen clear political power waning from Trump over the last year. Democrats won the special elections, and there have been some slight fissures in the Republican Party and even in the MAGA coalition. I don't have to rehearse all of those now for you. So I think he enters this year significantly weaker than he entered the last year, and people are thinking he's a lame duck. So that's one area where he's clearly weaker. But on the other hand, he's been empowered by the Supreme Court in a variety of ways. He's got more presidential and executive power than he had at the beginning of this term, and sort of a cornered badger. And the closer we get to the midterms, and the worse that the midterms look, the worse the lashing out may be, the worse the mobilization of the National Guard or the military to guard election sites. So I think there could be some really dangerous moments over the next year as they try to hold on to power. And whether the institutions hold up or not is a big question. But so far, most major institutions have really wobbled. So you saw academia and big law, and the courts have been pretty good at the lower level, but the high court has been quite weak. Congress is extraordinarily weak. You see the media, you see CBS and big media bribing him in the early days. The media is a mixed picture. I think the Times and the Wall Street Journal has stood up to him when Trump sued. So that's Rupert Murdoch stunningly being a champion of the free press. So it's a mixed picture there, but the institutions have been weaker, and so they're going to continue to be tested, and we'll see. I mean, we'll cover it at least.
You'll cover it. You'll be back a year from now, if unless someone. I know for me there are different lines when things slip, but I think the moment that there's no turning back is when the military comes onto the set and takes over. And I got to tell you, having Trump's administration not literally come onto the set, but spike this story is getting close to there. So not loving it, but hoping we can still be back here freely talking about this stuff without armed guards. I'm actually 100% certain of that, but maybe I shouldn't be. But anyway, Jesse, thanks for chatting with us.
Great to be on. Thank you.
Great to see you. And friends, please, tomorrow I will give you the link, but please consider donating to organizations like ProPublica or other folks whose work you trust. And by the way, even though I was angry at the Washington Post a while ago, I joined again. I always subscribe to Wall Street Journal and New York Times. People can be angry about individual reporters. Hello, David Brooks, et cetera. But the reporting there, don't get, I don't know. For me, I need to read everything. And so that's kind of how I am. Anyhow. Okay. Well, thanks, Jesse. Thanks, everybody. See you guys tomorrow.
Thanks a lot.
See you guys tomorrow morning. Bye. And with that, let's play our outgoing music. Love being with you guys. And remember, I think this is going to be the most important news for us always. Remember, the simple step of a courageous individual is not to take part in the lie.
Hello, prison mates. It's the Taub show where welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There is hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Taub show.